As a big thank you for 1000 subscribers and because I often get questions about the tactical class or my game settings, I've created a guide packed with everything I know about the tactical marine, including my settings like the key bindings I use. Since space marines don't like to waste time, let's jump right into it. The tactical marine specializes in range damage with access to an arsenal of primary weapons that each have their own strengths and weaknesses that I'll be going over. Their ability is the Auspex scan, which acts as a legal war hack that you can use to reveal enemies hiding behind cover for a few seconds. However, unlike in PvE ops where scanning them gives a damage buff when you shoot at a target, I've actually confirmed with Penguin, one of the staff members of Focus Entertainment, that there is no damage buff when you use the Auspex scan in PvP. The tactical's other ability is being able to carry two pieces of equipment, which are pretty much just grenades except for the Melta Bomb. This ability gives you massive playmaking utility and AoE damage potential. What loadout you choose to equip into battle can greatly influence how you play. Certain guns will not allow you to do things you usually would with other guns, like engaging targets at long range. For most of the guns, the longer the range, the more your damage falls off when shooting. Having said that, if you have good control over your bolter's cone of fire, you can make even the auto bolter capable of dealing accurate damage from a longer distance. The first gun we have is the default bolt rifle. This is the most versatile bolter in your arsenal and one of the best guns for shooters. Once you master the cone of fire mechanic, you are capable of engaging targets across all ranges. It's a jack of all trades, and it isn't the strongest in any range category, but that versatility is what makes it so good, because I can rely on it to engage any target. If it's a bolt action sniper on a cliff, I can peek them with this gun. If it's CQC, I can fire this gun full auto at the enemy. So what's the best way to shoot the bolt rifle? You can simply fire full auto for close range engagements, and for mid to long range, instead of holding down the trigger, you control the cone of fire by tap firing it like it's a semi-auto. Since it's not a semi-auto gun, you have a measure of control over how fast the rate of fire is when you tap fire it like a semi-auto, and you can transition to full auto at any time. If you tap fire it fast enough, it's got identical cone of fire expansion as if you just fired it full auto. You can easily win close range 1v1s with this gun as long as you aim for the head when shooting at the target for the extra headshot damage multiplier. When switching between different targets, always release the trigger during transition before firing again when your crosshair is on the next target. This applies to every gun in general. Next is my personal favorite, the auto bolt rifle. I love this bolter because it can destroy the enemies in 1v1s and it empowers you to play aggressively. It has the second highest rates of fire for a tactical class bolter, and it shreds enemies in close range. It has a punishing cone of fire that expands quickly, but when you learn to control the cone of fire, you realize you can also fire full auto at targets at mid-range, as long as your initial crosshair is on the target. When shooting at an enemy at mid-range, you can just semi-auto tap them once or twice to make sure your initial crosshair is on them before firing full auto. To control the cone of fire for mid-range, shoot a full auto burst like 5 bolts, then release the trigger for 1 second before firing again. This bolter is powerful at close and mid-range, and you will win a lot of gunfights with this gun. For long range, you can just tap fire this gun like it's a semi-auto. It will still chip away at an enemy at long range, and you can even get kills if you tap fire fast enough while controlling the cone of fire. Your heavy bolt rifle has a very easy cone of fire to control, and it has good stats which makes it one of the best guns for the tactical. The cone of fire will still expand, but it does so slowly. Having said that, the smaller your cone of fire, the more accurate you will be. So if your initial shots miss the target, take your finger off the trigger and readjust your crosshair on the target before opening fire again. This gun excels in mid to long range shooting. You can beat a sniper in a 1v1 with this gun, as long as you AD strafe side to side while shooting, which is something I'll talk about in more detail later. However, in close quarters combat, it will lose to other bolters like the auto bolt because it has a lower rate of fire. Sometimes you'll find that it's not quick enough to finish off a target before you can switch to another target. You have to position yourself smartly, not necessarily at the back line, but maintaining distance between the enemy team and you. Once you do that, you'll have an easy time, especially when shooting assaults hovering in the air, because your cone of fire expands so slowly you can fire full auto at them accurately. So as someone who loves close range shooting, I have a love-hate relationship with the bolt carbine. It's got the highest rate of fire out of all your guns, and it will absolutely shred the enemy in close quarters. However, it has the most punishing cone of fire. Even at close range, if you miss your initial shots, you need to lift your finger off the trigger to allow the cone of fire to reset before shooting again. Otherwise, it will expand so much your shots will go everywhere except at the target. At mid-range, you need to tap fire this gun the same way with the bolt rifle, like it's a semi-auto. Unlike the bolt rifle, you can never go full auto at mid-range. The cone of fire will just expand too quickly and become uncontrollable. So just quickly tap fire at an enemy and be ready to switch to your pistol if you run out of bullets. I think it goes without saying not to fire at long-range targets with this gun. If you are defending a position, hold an aggressive angle, and if you are pushing an enemy, make sure to make use of your utility like shock nades to help you close the distance, or go for flanks if you have enough info and opportunity to do so. The Marksman bolt carbine does its best work at mid-range. It's semi-auto by design, so its cone of fire depends on how fast you tap fire this gun. It has similar stats to the bolt rifle, however, it has 5 less bolts in a magazine, and it reloads slightly slower, so you have to be aware of your positioning when reloading. This does decent at close range, but you always have to maintain your distance and never get within melee range, so maintain a distance at all times when using this gun. If you have to 1v1 another tactical at close range, make use of your Auspex scan and utility like shock nades if you have them. Otherwise, you are screwed if they are using a close range killer like the auto bolt, simply because of fire rate, unless their aim is awful. If you are coming from PvE, you might think the Melta Rifle is the strongest gun in this arsenal, but in PvP, the Melta Rifle in the tactical is more of a shotgun that takes a few shots to kill someone from full health. It is completely useless mid-range and long range. You will only ever kill enemies with this gun at close range. This gun is hard to play offensively because obviously no one is going to let you run up to them and melt them in the face for free. Defensively, however, if they are running at you, then you can teach them a lesson about the Emperor. For 1v1s, you have to hope that their aim sucks, which is the only way you'll win a direct 1v1 with no help from your teammates. Even at close range, it only hits the hardest if you're within melee distance of the target. Between each shot, it can take a full second. You gotta dodge and strafe around to make yourself harder to hit. Personally, this gun does not fit me. I think relative to the other guns, it's the weakest gun for the tactical, especially since the tactical isn't tanky enough to survive how slow the Melta Rifle is between shots, unless the enemy can't aim that well. If you love the Melta, try playing multi-Melta with the heavy, since you will last longer between shots due to being more tanky. This is the strongest bolter the tactical has for long range engagements. It comes with a scope and is semi-auto with hard hitting shots. It can compete with snipers at range, but for close to mid-range shooting, your aim has to be on point since you only have 12 bolts in the magazine. It also has a very inaccurate hipfire. If you can make every shot count, you will do well with this gun. Only thing is, I would not recommend pushing aggressively with the Stalker, since if you get peeked by someone with a higher fire rate weapon, you are screwed. You should only push an enemy if you have the advantage already, like if you got a couple shots on them already or they have been damaged by a shock nade. This does well as a defensive point hold gun because of how hard hitting it is. Take your time lining up your crosshair with the target. As long as you always remain calm, you will do well with this gun. Last but not least is the plasma gun, aka the plasma incinerator. This gun is very powerful and hits hard at any distance. It does decent at close range, but because it's semi-auto by design, it's definitely not the strongest. If you 1v1 another tactical who has an auto bolt or carbine, you should lose, so it would be best to play this like a heavy bolter or a marksman bolt carbine. It doesn't have magazines, so you can maintain sustained fire for longer. The cone of fire for this gun, unlike the bolters, remains constant, so it's very reliable for accuracy, and it's very easy to use, especially for anyone who likes semi-automatics. Now, even though I recommend engaging at mid-range, this is one of the hardest hitting guns in the game, so don't be afraid to take close range fights if it's the better decision. The bolt pistol is a very reliable sidearm. You should switch to it immediately if you run out of bullets on your primary gun. It's semi-auto, but the cone of fire does expand rather quickly, so just be careful of that. If you try to kill an enemy using only the bolt pistol, just know that it's very weak as a primary weapon. Believe me, I've tried doing a bolt pistol only challenge. You need to go for headshots, otherwise it's gonna take a couple magazines to finish a target. I rarely use the Chainsword. I just find transitioning to the melee animation wastes precious time if I can just keep shooting the enemy. I only use the Chainsword if I run out of bullets and the enemy is right up in my face. I'll also use the Chainsword melee heavy attack if I could see that a Bulwark is low health behind the shield, because the heavy attack will break his shield pose and you can finish the Bulwark with 1 or 2 strikes. You have to make sure it's a heavy attack, otherwise it won't break their shield posture. When moving around the map, especially for objective point rotations, you can grab equipment boxes that give you an extra nade, or if you have none, 2 nades total. These boxes spawn in the same positions every time in the map, and it takes about 30 seconds for them to respawn. There are also ammo boxes that spawn in the same positions, and they take about 20 seconds for them to respawn. The Frag Grenade is a strong nade. It does good AoE damage and it's very good for pushing enemies and for defending a position. If there's a group of targets close together, a single well-placed Frag Grenade can do massive damage and help clear out a position. For defensive use, when an enemy pushes you, you can toss it at where you predict they will be pushing you from, so that it deals damage to them for an easy kill. You can also do the same thing with a shock nade and the Melta Bomb, though the Melta Bomb is much harder to use. Next up is the shock nade, which is a very powerful nade. Even though it does less damage than the Frag Grenade, it gives you great utility, as it can slow enemies down, and it can also blind them for a few seconds if the nade hits them directly. You can even toss this at the feet of a shielded Bulwark, and they will take damage from it. A shock nade alone won't be enough to kill enemies with full health, so be ready to finish them off with your gun. If you watch my videos, you'll see I commonly like to use shock nades to open up any engagement. It massively increases your chances of winning any gunfight. Krak Grenades are pretty much only good for fighting Bulwarks. You can use them on other classes, but it's kind of a waste when you can easily shoot down the other classes. Using one Krak Grenade will break the Bulwark out of shield pose for a few seconds, but the Bulwark can easily reshield themselves. It takes 2 Krak Grenades to fully kill a shielded Bulwark. That's why I don't usually use Krak Grenades. I have them on a secondary loadout in case I meet a really good Bulwark player who's just very annoying to push off an objective. The last grenade is the Melta Bomb, which is pretty much the least effective grenade for the tactical. You can only use this offensively by getting up close to the enemy, which is very hard to do as a tactical unless your enemy can't aim at all or you flank behind them and they are just unaware. Defensively, you can place this on a position you're holding and wait for the enemy to push you or drop on you before detonating it. It really is easy to blow yourself up in the process as well. I've seen a good Bulwark player and good snipers make use of Melta Bombs. The Bulwark can use this very effectively against people trying to push them, and the sniper can actually place a Melta Bomb while they're still cloaked, so they make the best use of it offensively. A common theme you'll find with my shooting is that I like to strafe side to side when shooting. This makes me a harder target to hit for the enemy, especially if you are in a 1v1 shooting duel with another tactical or a sniper. I just press the A to D keys when shooting to strafe side to side. For this game, you want to make good use of the right hand peek. It's really effective peeking from this angle since you expose less of yourself, and for those on the receiving end, sometimes they can't see the enemy at all when they get shot down. If you go left hand peek, you expose much more of your body, so this is the riskier side to peek. It's best to make use of your utility like grenades and the Auspex scan as much as possible in a game. For the Auspex scan, I like to use it when I already have a rough idea of where the enemy is, but I want the exact positions. So how do you deal with each of the enemy classes as a tactical? For the Vanguard, if you have a good close range weapon like the auto bolter, shoot them before they hook you, so that after the hook, you can simply gun them down. The hook stun effect got nerfed as well, so it's so much easier to just shoot them after being hooked more than before. You can also toss a nade right after they hook you, which is something I like to do before the hook nerf, to give me a better chance of winning the fight even after being hooked. Otherwise, you generally have to maintain your distance behind cover or your allies from a Vanguard so they can't hook you. Vanguards also can't hook you if you're within melee range, so just use that information to your advantage. For snipers, bolt action snipers are generally easy for me to deal with. They usually sit behind their allies, so I either ignore them and prioritize their teammates, which is very easy to do on objective modes like capture and control, or I can peek them and outshoot them, which is not so easy to do unless you are confident in your shooting. Carbine snipers are more of a threat for me. I usually have to keep an eye on the flanks and pay attention to my screen, since their cloak can be spotted if you can differentiate the signs of a slight shimmer from the environment. For assaults, the biggest threat is a Thunderhammer assault. The others are easy to deal with. Keep your cone of fire controlled so you can deal as much damage as possible to them while they are still in the air, and be ready to dodge out of the way when they drop. For Thunderhammer assaults, you may have to dash back twice since they have a very long reach. Then depending on the gun you have, if it's the auto bolter for example, you can kill them easily before they can melee you. If you have a slower semi-auto like the Plasma Incinerator, it's going to be harder to kill them before they close the gap, so keeping as much distance as possible is the key. For heavies, if I have a Frag Grenade, tossing a Frag Grenade at them then shooting them at the same time can kill them quickly, even if their Iron Halo force field is up. Tossing a Shock Grenade at them can also be effective if it prevents them getting their Iron Halo up. Otherwise, I would simply wait for their shield to expire before re-peeking them and shooting them. Make sure you are not an easy target, because even if their Iron Halo is down, they can still beat you in a direct gunfight because they are tankier than you. Bulwarks would be the class I have the most trouble with, because I like playing the objective based modes. Their shield is more of an invisible wall, so even if you click at an exposed part of their body, like their helmet peeking over their shield, it won't do any damage. You will need Krak Grenades or rely on your teammates for help. You could flank behind them or toss a Shock Grenade and go behind them as well. You can break their shield pose with a heavy melee attack, but I only fight Bulwarks in melee if they are low enough that 1 or 2 melee strikes will kill them. Make sure you keep firing at a Bulwark to discourage them from peeking out from their shield and shooting at you. A good Bulwark player can even drop a Melta Bomb if they are being pushed, so it's very dangerous approaching even a low health Bulwark in general. I just depend on my teammates to help me deal with a Bulwark, because in a melee 1v1, a tactical is never going to win unless the Bulwark doesn't know how to use their shield and melee combos. As for other tacticals, consider what gun they are using. For example, if it's a Melta Rifle, just don't get too close. In general, a matchup between tacticals depends on who has better positioning, and in a direct gunfight, who has better aim. I'll be showing my mouse sense here. It's 4 for me, my mouse DPI is 800. Here are my key bindings. I pretty much only changed the ADS button from the default scroll wheel to control button, like in the first Space Marine game on PC. The scroll wheel now toggles closer ADS, like scoping in through my Marksman Carbine, or if it's the bolt grenade launcher on campaign, it toggles the grenade launcher. The tactical class rewards good aim, positioning, and decision making. Once you unlock the cosmetics you want, it really doesn't matter if you win or lose in PvP, so experiment and try out whatever playstyle you want that feels the most fun for you. The Melta Bomb clips were all from the same match, where I just ran up to every enemy and tried to bomb all of us up. You'll see in my gameplay videos that I'm a tryhard who likes to win capture and control matches because that's just what I like to do. Capture and control is my favorite game mode because it feels like any team can make a comeback during the match. That being said, do not ever play PvP if you are not in a good mood, because you'll just play worse than usual and it won't feel fun even if you normally find PvP to be fun. That pretty much concludes this guide for playing tactical on PvP. Thanks for watching.